Hey everybody, my name's Alex. I'm the lead instructor with Black Flag HEMA here in Tampa, Florida. And I just wanted to welcome you all to our channel, give you a little bit of an introduction about what we do here and what we plan to do in the future, and talk a little bit about our club and kind of what our goals are here at Black Flag HEMA. So we are a historical European martial arts club. We do sword fighting and wrestling and dagger fighting and all sorts of different things, as long as they are from a period of history that is not right now, as long as they originate in Europe or its colonies, which is kind of our personal interpretation of the E in HEMA. And as long as they are martial arts, then we're hopefully going to touch on them. Right now, primarily our curriculum focuses on Meyer's 1570 treatise, specifically Dr. Jeffrey Forgang? I've never had to say that word out loud. Focuses on Dr. Jeffrey Forgang's translation and the book that he published, which is fantastic, and I highly recommend it to anybody first getting into longsword or HEMA. And again, primarily what we study out of Meyer's 1570 is the longsword. It is an excellent source for longsword. There are a lot of tertiary sources that are kind of in the same German longsword tradition, or the longsword treatises and manuals that were recorded in primarily German. And there's a lot of information out there for people that want to start studying, including video resources and all sorts of events you can attend. And most major cities at this point have a fantastic HEMA club running in them. So if it's something you're interested in, it's actually super easy to start doing. But Meyer's treatise is not just longsword. It does have dusok, it has dagger, it has pole arms, it has some grappling and wrestling in it. Primarily what we focus on at the club from Meyer is longsword, and I grabbed a couple of pieces to show off. This is actually a little bit of an earlier period sword than maybe what Meyer would have used. It's a little bit shorter, but it's a fantastic sword. This is actually the Arms and Armor Dürer. This is the sharp cutting sword that I use to do tatami cutting, which is also another part of HEMA. Of course, we like to go full HEMA hillbilly and stand out in the driveway in the front yard and cut water bottles with it too. You know, it's hard to pass up an opportunity to cut something in half with a sword. Hopefully we'll be able to feature some reviews on swords like this and some other pieces and some other things relevant kind of to the longsword community. We'll talk a little bit about history and about Meyer's swords in general and Meyer's treatise and what we like about it, what we don't like about it, some of our experimentations and interpretations, and some other things that have to do with generally longsword. Our other primary focus right now in the club is on Saber and Rapier, which at first glance don't seem particularly related, especially if you're familiar with either of the systems, because they don't coexist. There are not a whole lot of Saber manuals from the height of the era of Rapier manuals, and vice versa. There are not a lot of late period Rapier manuals from the same period as most of our primary Saber sources would come from. That being said, we've decided to put all of our training towards single-handed swords kind of in the same bucket because they do inform each other quite a bit. And even in late period, when we start seeing like into the McBain or the Roworth or some of the other sources, which again, we will have more content coming soon about those sources. When we look into those sources, all of those masters, all the way from like McBain in the early 1700s up through Roworth and Hope and into those kind of crossover military manuals a little bit later in the 18th and 19th century, what we see is an abundance of people who are recommending to cross-train. There's an abundance of folks who are recommending that people should not only be studying small sword, they should also be studying saber, and they should be doing single stick, and they should be boxing, and they should be doing all of those things. So what we've really done is we've tried to take that cross-training mentality and apply it to a variety of systems in a modern HEMA mindset. And again, just for those of you that are not necessarily HEMA familiar, this is a Darkwood Pappenheimer rapier. This is their practice blade. Again, I'll probably do a couple of reviews on swords that we use and have in the club. This is, these are my personal weapons. We do have some club weapons I can review as well. But this is kind of the standard for what we do on our rapier curriculum, which is primarily based on Capoferro's 1610 curriculum, although I have developed a newfound love for Marazzo recently, Marazzo's single sword. I started working through some of the assaults from Marazzo's single sword, and I think they're fantastic. I really, really like a lot of what Marazzo does, and I think that the idea of almost the kata, for those of you that are familiar with Eastern martial arts, that that style of training is relevant, if not necessarily martially applicable immediately. It does take a degree of interpretation and a degree of understanding, but once that degree of understanding is there, I think it's a fantastic training tool. Anyways, we primarily focus on thrust-oriented, middle period Italian rapier. That's most of our rapier curriculum. So to kind of dial back in, that's our club. That's what our club does. We do work on some other things. I'm actually going to have a dagger video coming out soon to talk a little bit about the dagger we do and what we found out about it. A little bit more about me, by the way. Like I said, my name's Alex. I founded Black Flag HEMA in 2016, so I have not been doing HEMA for very long, but I have been doing sword work and martial arts since around 2006. I actually started with combat for the stage and screen, choreographed combat. I started kind of in that world. And I got tired of constantly having to fake it and constantly not knowing how these things worked in real life. So I moved into fencing about a year after that. So I've been fencing since 2007, primarily epee, foil, and saber, which I also highly recommend. I am not one of those martial artists or HEMA people that just absolutely despises Olympic fencing in any way. I think it's extremely valuable. I think that all fights are timing, distance, measure, and reaction, and they're all kind of the same. Just with different tools and different specialties and different goals. I'm a big proponent of sparring. I think people should fence. I think people should spar. I think people should do it. I don't think it can be the only part of the curriculum. I think if a bunch of people just start sparring without any training, I think A, they're going to hurt each other, and I think B, they're not going to learn anything. But I do think there's a pretty quintessential part of training that involves testing what you're doing against an opponent who's trying to not let you do it. So I started in stage combat, I moved over to fencing, and then I got into classical fencing. I spent some time, a very brief period of time, training in Northern Shaolin, Wushu, and I have kind of been a satellite student of several other disciplines, including American Kempo through several friends, and I would never call myself a student of American Kempo. I have done several classes and several seminars. I've attended workshops for these things, on several different continents at this point, and I still, under no circumstances, consider myself an end-all authority. I think that there are a few things that I do know what I'm talking about, and I think that really this whole channel is kind of an opportunity for me to force myself to grow and to force myself to learn, and to help my club grow and to learn, because we're going to put up sparring videos and fencing videos. We're going to put up history videos, which are going to require us to learn and do research. We're going to put up gear reviews, which are going to require us to really analyze and critique the kinds of equipment we're using and what they're for. We're going to talk about historical manuals, and hopefully kind of all of our talents will combine. We actually have a project we want to do in the near future called Choreographing History. In Richard Marsden's HEMA in its context, Historical European Martial Arts in its context, in that book, there are several fantastic first-hand accounts of duels and of martial encounters. And what we would like to do, right, I'm in a kind of a special seat here where not only do I have a little bit of a background in choreography and stage work and fight choreography, but I also now have a background in history and martial arts. My bachelor's degree is actually in archaeology and anthropology, specifically physical anthropology. So I like to think I have a pretty decent grasp of the research process and the scientific method and how humans have gotten to the point where they are today. As much of a grasp as anybody else has anyways, because we're only pretty sure. We're in a neat position to do this series that we want to do called Choreographing History, where we can actually reconstruct some of these first-hand accounts and these duels. And these martial encounters, and there's a fantastic pass to arms with mismatched pole axes that's described move by move, and actually show you what they could have looked like. Not definitively what they looked like, but what they could have looked like when they occurred. There's another series we'd like to do on the channel where we actually take a look kind of in the opposite direction, where I would like to take some existing Hollywood or television choreography and show what might that have looked like in real life. There are a million reasons why choreographed fights don't look the way that real fights do. I find the most relevant of which is that they'd be boring and short. Watching fencing can be very entertaining to lots of people who understand fencing, much in the same that watching mixed martial arts or say a judo competition or a jiu-jitsu competition is very interesting to people who understand what the two participants are doing. Choreography has to tell a story about martial conflict and should involve a degree of what one of my favorite teachers referred to as martial truth. Under no circumstances should it just be fiction. However, it's important that this still be entertaining. So it's really interesting, which then, say for example, the fight scene at the end of Fellowship of the Ring with Boromir and all the orcs and all of that, it might be really interesting to look at a multiple opponent fight scene like that and see what we actually end up with if we try to apply a higher degree of realism. We also could talk about one of probably my least favorite fights that I've seen in fiction in the last few years, which is the Oberyn Martell and the Mountain fight from Game of Thrones. I think season 3-ish was absolutely one of my least favorite fights that I've seen on TV or film. I really think they did a disservice to both of those characters by portraying them the way that they did. Both of those characters are supposed to be very martially talented, and there really was not a degree of realism in that fight at all, which, for a show that prides itself on realism and grit in a fantasy world, it would have been nice to see that with their combat. It would have been nice to see that with their martial truth as well. You know, characters die left and right, and that's fantastic, but we really want to see the physicality run through. All of those actors are incredible physical actors. All of the stuntmen are incredible. And actually that choreographer is fantastic. The choreographer that did that, I really liked some of the other stuff that they did. But there is a degree of martial reality that was missing from that scene in particular. So those are two of the series that we want to do that take a little bit more work, might take a little bit more time to get them up on the channel. But we're looking for choreographing history, right? We want to do choreographed accounts of real primary sources, and when I say primary sources, we're talking about letters about the duels, survivors' accounts, things like that. We're going to take those sorts of things for a single account and try to choreograph them and show you what they might have looked like. And then we want to do kind of the opposite, which we don't have a name for that series yet, but we want to take fictional choreographed fights and reverse engineer them to be more realistic, or what might this have looked like in real life? What might this have actually been like? So I hope you're excited for our content. I hope that you will like and subscribe to our channel, the Black Flag HEMA channel. Black Flag HEMA is the name of our HEMA club. My name is Alex, and we hope to have a lot more content coming at you soon. Thanks so much, and see you next time.